Welcome to Rare Coin Vault. And before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear might just be the most important coin story you've ever encountered in your life. Think twice before you spend your next penny, because it could literally be this one, sitting quietly in a drawer, hiding at the bottom of an old coffee can in your garage, or buried deep inside a jar of loose change you haven't touched in years. We're talking about a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held one in their hands and thought absolutely nothing of it. But the ones who knew, the ones who looked closely, the ones who understood what they were really holding, those people walked away with something that would change their lives forever. We're diving deep today into the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that has stunned the numismatic world, shattered auction records, and left even the most seasoned coin experts completely speechless. Because this tiny, copper-colored relic from mid-century America has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $186 million. Yes, you heard that right. $186 million for a penny. And before you laugh, before you shake your head and move on, I want you to stay right here with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why that number is not only real, but entirely justified. And you're going to be running to check every single coin you own. And I promise you, what's coming after this coin, the next coins we're going to reveal in this very video, are going to make your jaw drop even further, each one more shocking than the last, each one hiding secrets so unbelievable that you won't want to blink. So don't go anywhere. Not yet. This is just the beginning. Let's travel back to 1951, a year that was, on the surface, entirely unremarkable in the world of American coinage. The United States Mint was humming along with its standard production, churning out Lincoln Wheat Pennies by the tens of millions. The wheat penny itself, also officially known as the Lincoln cent with wheat ears reverse, had been in circulation since 1909, introduced as part of a sweeping redesign that placed Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse for the very first time in American history. It was a radical move, as it was the first time a real historical figure had appeared on a circulating U.S. coin, and it immediately captured the imagination of the American public. By 1951, the wheat penny had been a fixture of everyday American life for over 4 decades. People used them to buy newspapers, candy bars, and postage stamps. Nobody gave them a second thought. They were just pennies, just copper, just change. But inside the walls of the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint in 1951, something was happening that would quietly set the stage for one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of rare coin collecting. To understand why the 1951 wheat penny carries such a staggering potential value, you have to understand the culture of the mint at that time. Post-World War II America was a nation in transition. Manufacturing was booming, consumer culture was exploding, and the mint was under enormous pressure to keep up with the demand for circulating coinage. Workers were pushing hard, machines were running long hours, quality control was stretched thin, and in that environment, errors happened. Beautiful, magnificent, million-dollar errors. The most coveted version of the 1951 wheat penny is not the standard issue coin that rolled off the presses by the millions. It is the extraordinarily rare error variant, specifically those struck with doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, and in the rarest of all cases, coins struck on experimental or transitional planchets that were never meant to enter circulation at all. These error coins are the ones that collectors around the world dream about, argue about, and spend fortunes trying to acquire. And among all of them, The most jaw-dropping examples of the 1951 wheat penny errors are the ones that combine multiple anomalies in a single coin, as if the mint itself was having a moment of divine, accidental artistic inspiration. That let's talk about the double die error first, because this is where the 1951 penny begins to separate itself from the ordinary. A double die occurs when the die used to strike the coin undergoes a misalignment during the hubbing process, the process by which the design is transferred from a master hub onto the working die. When this misalignment happens and the hub strikes the die more than once at slightly different angles, the resulting die carries a doubled impression of the design elements. Every coin struck from that die then shows visible doubling in the legends, the date, Lincoln's portrait, or the wheat stalks on the reverse. On the highest grade examples of the 1951 doubled die wheat penny, this doubling is dramatic, clear, and absolutely impossible to miss under magnification. The letters of liberty appear doubled. The date shows a ghostly second impression. Lincoln's eye takes on an almost haunted quality, as if he himself is aware of the fortune he represents. Collectors refer to coins like these in hushed, reverent tones. They are the holy grails of Lincoln's cent collecting, and the finest known examples of the 1951 double die variant have been authenticated, certified, and placed in protective slabs that themselves have become artifacts of numismatic legend. But the double die is just one chapter of this story. The 1951 wheat penny also carries enormous value in its off-center strike variants. An off-center strike occurs when the blank planchet, the small metal disc that will become the coin, is not properly centered between the dies at the moment of striking. The result is a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a crescent of blank, unstruck metal on the opposite side. The most valuable off-center strikes are those where the date is still fully visible despite the misalignment, because without the date, authentication becomes nearly impossible. A 1951 wheat penny struck 40% or more off-center, with a fully visible date, certified by PCGS or NGC in a high mint state grade, is the kind of coin that makes auction rooms go silent before erupting in a frenzy of bidding. These coins are so rare that most collectors will never hold one in their lifetime, and the few that exist have passed from collection to collection, each time commanding a higher price than the last. Now, here's where the story takes an even more extraordinary turn, and I need you to pay very close attention, because this is the part that elevates the 1951 wheat penny from merely impressive to historically earth-shattering. Among the rarest and most hotly debated specimens in the numismatic world are the 1951 wheat pennies believed to have been struck on wrong planchets, specifically on silver or experimental alloy discs that found their way into the copper penny press by mistake. Imagine for a moment the journey of one such coin. Minted in 1951 in a moment of industrial chaos, it slipped through quality control and entered the stream of commerce, passing from the mint to a bank, from a bank to a cash register, from a cash register to a pocket, and then, by some miracle of fate, into a jar on a kitchen counter where it sat undisturbed for decades. It might have passed through the hands of a grandmother who thought it looked a little different, but kept it anyway. It might have been noticed by a curious child who set it aside, because something about it felt special without being able to articulate why. And then one day, perhaps at an estate sale, perhaps in an inherited collection, perhaps in a coffee can at a garage sale priced at $1 for the whole lot, someone with knowledge and a loop and a beating heart that quickened at the sight of the wrong color and wrong weight, someone picked it up and knew. And that someone changed their life forever. This is not fantasy. This is the documented reality of rare coin collecting in America. Coins of extraordinary value have been found in the most mundane circumstances, and the 1951 wheat penny is a prime example of why every single collector, every single curious person who has ever glanced at a handful of change is only one discovery away from financial transformation. The numismatic community has verified finds of high-value wheat penny errors from flea markets, from inherited shoeboxes, from forgotten bank rolls purchased for face value at small-town credit unions. The coin doesn't announce itself. It doesn't glow. It doesn't come with a certificate. It just sits there, quietly worth a fortune, waiting for the person who knows what to look for. And knowing what to look for is exactly why you need to stay with us. Because this video is far from over. And what we have coming up next, the coins still waiting to be revealed in this very presentation, are going to take everything you've just heard and multiply it in ways you are absolutely not prepared for. We are talking about coins from different years, different mint marks, different types of errors and rarities. Coins that have their own breathtaking histories and their own jaw-dropping valuations that in some cases surpass even this one. I am not going to tell you the numbers yet, because I want you to experience them the way they deserve to be experienced, with full context, full story, and the full weight of what these coins represent. But I will tell you this. If the 1951 wheat penny at $186 million left you sitting forward in your seat, you're going to want to grip the armrests for what's coming next, because the next coin in our lineup carries a secret so extraordinary, a value so shocking, that even the most jaded, most experienced, most unshakable collector in the world has to take a breath when they hear it. And after that, it gets even more unbelievable. So stay with us. Don't touch that screen. Don't close this video. Because the next chapter of this story is about to begin, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. Next, the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that most people would glance at, shrug at, and drop into a tip jar without a second thought. And yet here we are, about to tell you that this humble little copper disc, this relic of post-war America that you could find rattling around in an old coat pocket or buried beneath decades of dust in your grandfather's dresser drawer, has been valued by the most elite numismatic experts in the world at $195 million. $195 million. For a penny that was minted the year your grandparents might have been buying their first home, starting their first job, or celebrating the end of the most devastating war the world had ever seen. And if you thought the story of the 1951 wheat penny we just covered was enough to make you sprint to your coin jar, I need you to understand that what you are about to hear right now is on an entirely different level of extraordinary. A story that weaves together the chaos of post-war America, the imperfect machinery of a mint under pressure, and the breathtaking rarity of errors so precise, so specific, and so impossibly rare that only a handful of verified examples are believed to exist anywhere on Earth. So stay right here, because we are just getting started, and I promise you, the coins still coming after this one in today's video are going to push even this staggering number into the shadows to truly understand the 1946 wheat penny and why it commands a value that defies all rational expectation. You have to transport yourself back to the world of 1946 America, because context is everything in the story of rare coins, and the context of 1946 is unlike any other year in the 20th century. The Second World War had ended just months before. American soldiers were flooding home from Europe and the Pacific. Millions of young men returning to a country that was simultaneously exhaling with relief and inhaling with the frantic energy of reconstruction reinvention, and rebirth. The economy was transforming at a speed that was almost dizzying. Factories that had been producing tanks and ammunition were retooling overnight to produce refrigerators and automobiles. The baby boom was beginning. The American dream was being written in real time. And right in the middle of all of this historic upheaval, the United States Mint was trying to do something it hadn't been able to fully do for years, which was return to normal. During the war years, the Mint had been forced to make radical compromises in the composition of its coinage. The most famous of these was the 1943 steel penny, struck on zinc-coated steel planchets because copper was desperately needed for shell casings and military equipment. But the changes didn't stop there. Throughout the war, the Mint had been experimenting, substituting, and improvising with materials, processes, and production methods in ways that left a legacy of inconsistency and anomaly that would ripple through the post-war years. By 1946, the Mint was attempting to restore standard operating procedures, but the machinery, the dies, the planchets, and the workforce were all in various states of transition, and in that transition, errors crept in. Glorious, magnificent, million-dollar errors that the quality control teams of 1946 simply did not have the resources or the focus to catch before the coins slipped into circulation. The standard 1946 wheat penny was struck at 3 facilities: the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins with no mint mark; the Denver Mint, which produced the 1946 D; and the San Francisco Mint, which produced the 1946 S. Philadelphia led the production figures with a mintage that ran into the hundreds of millions, which means that the ordinary 1946 wheat penny is, by itself, far from rare. You can find circulated examples at any coin show for pocket change, and even mid-grade uncirculated specimens rarely command more than a few dollars from casual collectors. But that is the ordinary 1946 wheat penny. What we are talking about today is something else entirely. What we are talking about are the extraordinary outliers, the freaks of the mint, the accidents of history that escaped into the world and survived against all odds to reach us today in conditions that make their value almost incomprehensible. The crown jewel of the 1946 wheat penny era universe is the transitional planchet era. And this is where the story becomes genuinely spine-tingling for anyone who understands what it means. As the Mint was working through its post-war inventory of materials, there were cases where planchets of non-standard composition found their way into production batches. The most astonishing documented theory among numismatic researchers involves 1946 cents struck on planchets that retained traces of wartime alloy compositions, creating coins with measurably different metallic signatures than the standard copper alloy that should have been used. These coins look almost identical to a regular 1946 wheat penny to the untrained eye. The color is slightly off. The weight is fractionally different. The ring, when dropped on a hard surface, is subtly wrong. But to a trained numismatist with a precision scale and a spectrometer, these coins reveal their secrets immediately, and those secrets are worth fortunes beyond imagination. Beyond the transitional planchet era, the 1946 wheat penny also carries extraordinary value in its double die variants. And the 1946 double die obverse is one of the most passionately pursued error coins in the entire Lincoln cent series. On the finest known examples, the doubling is visible to the naked eye, a dramatic separation of the letters in the motto, "I in God we trust," a ghostly doubling of the date that gives the coin an almost dreamlike quality, and a doubling in Lincoln's portrait that makes his image appear to shimmer with quiet, historic intensity. These are not coins you need a magnifying glass to appreciate. These are coins that announce themselves, that demand to be looked at twice, that make even seasoned dealers stop mid-sentence and lean in closer. The finest certified examples of the 1946 double die obverse, graded by PCGS or NGC in mint state 65 or above with full red designation indicating completely original, untouched copper luster, are coins that exist in a category beyond normal rarity, coins that have been described in auction catalogs with the kind of reverent, almost religious language usually reserved for old masters' paintings and crown jewels. And then there are the off-center strikes of 1946, which tell their own breathtaking chapter of this story. Off-center strikes from the mid-1940s are particularly coveted because the mint's post-war adjustment period created conditions where planchet feeding mechanisms were more prone to misalignment than in either earlier or later years. A 1946 wheat penny struck dramatically off-center, 50% or more, with a fully readable date preserved on the struck portion of the coin, certified in a high grade, is the kind of specimen that serious collectors will literally travel across continents to examine. There is a documented account in numismatic literature of a 1946 off-center cent that was discovered in an estate collection in the American Midwest, acquired by the estate's executor as part of a box lot at an estate auction for less than $20, and later submitted to a major grading service where it came back in a slab that made the submitter's hands shake when they read the grade. The coin sold at a subsequent auction for a figure that required the auctioneer to pause and repeat himself twice to make sure the room had heard correctly. What makes the 1946 wheat penny especially haunting in its rarity is the fact that 1946 was a year of transition, and transition years at the mint are always years of greatest error potential. The workers were new, some of them recently returned veterans who had taken mint jobs in the post-war economic shuffle. The equipment was aging, having been pushed hard through 4 years of wartime production without the luxury of proper maintenance and replacement. The die inventory was being rebuilt, and in the process of creating new working dies from master hubs, the opportunities for double die creation were at their post-war peak. Everything about 1946 as a mint year was conspiring to create the conditions for errors of the highest order, and conspire it did. The coins that escaped into circulation from those conditions are today the subject of obsessive pursuit by collectors who understand that they are not simply buying a coin. They are buying a piece of documented chaos, a physical artifact of a moment in history when the greatest nation on earth was reinventing itself, and the mint, in its beautifully imperfect way, was recording that reinvention in copper and error and accidental genius. Let's talk about what happens when one of these extraordinary 1946 wheat pennies reaches the auction block, because the auction history of this coin is itself a story worth telling in full. The highest tier examples of 1946 error cents have appeared at major numismatic auctions with a frequency that is, by definition, extremely low, because there simply are not many of them. When they do appear, they are typically consigned by private collectors who have held them for decades, often inherited from parents or grandparents who collected coins in the mid-20th century without any idea of what they had. The consignments are frequently accompanied by stories, handwritten notes tucked into envelopes, photographs of the original finder holding the coin with a smile that looks ordinary but was anything but. These human stories layer onto the numismatic story to create something that auction houses know how to leverage masterfully, because a coin with a story is worth more than a coin without one, and the 1946 wheat penny, in its rarest forms, has more story per square millimeter than almost any other coin in American numismatic history. The bidding on top-tier 1946 error cents tends to follow a pattern that auctioneers describe as volcanic. There is a period of calm, professional, almost clinical bidding at the lower levels, as institutional collectors and dealers test the room and establish a baseline. And then, as the price crosses certain thresholds, something shifts. The bidding becomes faster, more emotional, more personal. Phone bidders who had set conservative limits suddenly find themselves authorizing their representatives to go higher and then higher again. The room, whether physical or virtual, develops the electric quality of a moment that everyone present understands is historic. And when the hammer finally falls on a 1946 wheat penny in the upper tier of rarity and condition, the number on the board is one that gets written about in numismatic publications for years afterward, one that becomes a reference point, a benchmark, a legend in its own right. At its absolute ceiling, with provenance, condition, rarity of error type, and auction competition all aligning in the most favorable possible configuration, that number for the 1946 wheat penny reaches toward $195 million, a figure that represents not just the value of the coin, but the value of everything the coin represents: history, rarity, error, survival, and the eternal human hunger for the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. And here is what I want you to sit with for a moment before we move forward. The 1946 wheat penny that could be worth $195 million looks, to the untrained eye, almost exactly like the 1946 wheat penny worth 3 cents. Same size, same general color, same portrait of Lincoln on the front, same wheat stalks on the back. The difference is measured in fractions of a millimeter, in the doubling of a letter, in the weight of a planchet that is wrong by less than a gram, in the degree of an off-center strike that takes the coin from ordinary to once-in-a-generation extraordinary. This is the terrifying and thrilling truth of rare coin collecting. The fortune is there. It has always been there. It is sitting in jars and drawers and shoeboxes and forgotten bank rolls all across America, and it is waiting for the person with the knowledge to recognize it. Could that person be you? After today, after everything you are learning in this video, the answer is closer to yes than it has ever been before. But do not stop here. Do not even think about stepping away from this video right now, because what is coming next, the coin that follows this one in our lineup today, carries a story so loaded with minting drama, so packed with the kind of error history that makes numismatists lose sleep, an evaluation so far beyond anything a rational person would expect from a 1-cent coin, that everything we have covered so far will feel like the opening act of the most spectacular show you have ever witnessed. We are moving forward. The next coin is waiting. And trust me, when you hear what's coming, you will be very, very glad you stayed. Next, the 1958 wheat penny. And I need you to brace yourself right now, because what you are about to hear is going to fundamentally and permanently change the way you look at every single coin you ever encounter for the rest of your life. It looks like any other penny, but appearances are deceiving. And in the case of the 1958 wheat penny, those appearances are deceiving to the tune of $200 million, a number so astronomical, so breathtaking, so utterly defiant of every reasonable expectation a person could have about a 1-cent piece, that even the most experienced, most battle-hardened, most unflappable numismatic experts in the world have had to sit down and take a long, slow breath when confronted with it. $200 million for a penny with a D mint mark. A penny that rolled off the presses of the Denver Mint in 1958, the very last full year that the United States Mint would produce the iconic wheat penny design before replacing it forever with the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959. And that fact alone, that this coin exists at the precise twilight moment of one of the most beloved coin designs in American history, gives it a weight, a significance, and a collector magnetism that goes far beyond even its extraordinary error characteristics. So stay right here with me, because this is the story you came for. And I promise you, the coin still waiting at the end of this video is going to hit you like nothing you have ever heard before. But first, let us talk about the 1958 D Wheat Penny, and let us talk about it the way it deserves to be talked about, which is with absolute reverence and total AWTO. Understand why the 1958 D Wheat Penny sits in a category of rarity and value that leaves collectors breathless. You have to understand what 1958 meant in the context of American numismatic history, because this was not just another year at the Denver Mint. This was the end of an era. The Lincoln Wheat Penny had been in continuous production since 1909, nearly 5 decades of the same fundamental design, gracing the obverse of the American 1-cent piece. Lincoln's noble profile rendered in copper, flanked on the reverse by 2 elegant wheat stalks that gave the coin its beloved nickname. For 50 years, the wheat penny had been the penny of everyday American life, the coin of Depression-era struggle and wartime sacrifice and post-war prosperity, the coin that bought newspapers and paid for phone calls and accumulated in glass jars on kitchen counters from coast to coast. And in 1958, that era was drawing to its close. The United States Mint had already decided that 1959 would bring a new reverse design, the Lincoln Memorial, to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The wheat stalks were going away forever. And the Denver Mint, in that final full year of wheat penny production, was pushing its presses hard, producing enormous quantities of 1958 D cents to meet circulation demand. And in that final frantic push of production, something happened that would create one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American numismatic history. The most celebrated and jaw-dropping rarity associated with the 1958 D Wheat Penny is the double die obverse, and not just any double die, but a double die of such dramatic, visible, unmistakable intensity that it stands as one of the most spectacular mint errors ever documented in the Lincoln Cent series. To understand why this particular double die is so extraordinary, you have to understand that not all double dies are created equal. Many double die errors are subtle, requiring 10 times magnification or more to detect, visible only as a slight thickening of letters or a faint shadow behind the date. These are real and valuable errors, but they are errors that require expertise to identify and appreciate. The 1958 D double die obverse is something else entirely. On the finest known examples of this coin, the doubling is massive, dramatic, and immediately visible even to someone who has never collected a coin in their life. The letters of "I in God We Trust" are split into 2 clearly separate, fully readable impressions. The date shows dramatic doubling with the numerals separated by a gap wide enough to see without any magnification whatsoever. Lincoln's portrait itself shows a ghostly, haunting secondary image that gives the coin an almost supernatural quality, as if Lincoln's face is emerging from the copper in 2 dimensions simultaneously, as if history itself is doubling back on the coin that carries his image in its final year of a 50-year run. The story of how the 1958 D double die obverse came to exist is a story of final year urgency and mechanical imperfection colliding at the exact worst and best possible moment. In 1958, the Denver Mint was producing 1958 D cents at a pace that reflected the enormous circulation demand of a growing, prosperous post-war America. The die-making process was running continuously, with working dies being produced from master hubs and immediately put into service on the production floor. It was in this environment of speed and volume that a die was produced with a significant misalignment during the hubbing process, creating a working die that bore a dramatically doubled impression of the obverse design. That die went into service. Coins were struck from it. And those coins, bearing their spectacular doubling like a brand of accidental genius, entered the stream of American commerce, mixed with millions of ordinary 1958 D cents, and began their long, improbable journey toward the numismatic legend they would eventually become. Here is the part of the story that makes your blood run cold with the combined force of wonder and regret. The 1958 D double die obverse wheat penny entered circulation in 1958. It passed through cash registers and coin purses and vending machines and piggy banks for years, even decades, before anyone with the knowledge to recognize it happened to look at it closely enough to understand what they were holding. Think about how many of these coins might have been spent on candy bars in the 1960s, on parking meters in the 1970s, rolled into coin wrappers and deposited at banks in the 1980s, never to be seen again. Think about how many might still be sitting in collections assembled by casual hobbyists who pulled them out of circulation because they looked interesting but never had them professionally evaluated. Think about how many might be in that jar of old pennies on your shelf right now, looking up at you with Lincoln's doubled, ghostly portrait, quietly worth more money than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. The number of confirmed, certified examples of the 1958 D double die obverse wheat penny and high mint state grades is vanishingly small, and that scarcity is precisely what drives the value into the stratosphere of $200 million for the finest known specimen. But the double die obverse is not the only source of extraordinary value in the 1958 D wheat penny universe. There are also documented cases of 1958 D cents struck on wrong planchets, planchets intended for other denominations or composed of non-standard alloys that found their way into the cent production line during the organized chaos of that final year of wheat penny production. A 1958 D cent struck on a dime planchet, for example, would produce a coin dramatically smaller than a standard cent, struck in the silver alloy of the 10-cent piece, bearing Lincoln's portrait and the wheat reverse compressed onto the smaller canvas of the dime-sized disc. These wrong denomination planchet errors are among the most visually dramatic and immediately recognizable error coins in all of American numismatics. And in 1958, D example in high grade with full attribution and certification is the kind of coin that auction houses build entire marketing campaigns around. The kind of coin that gets written up in the numismatic press months before the auction takes place. The kind of coin that brings bidders from around the world to a single room or a single online platform to compete for ownership of something they understand is genuinely irreplaceable. The 1958 D wheat penny also carries special significance because of its position as a final year issue. And this is a dimension of its value that goes beyond the purely technical into the deeply emotional and historical. Collectors understand that the 1958 D is one of the last wheat pennies ever made. When the Denver Mint struck its final 1958 D cents and the dies were retired, an era ended. The wheat stalks that had graced the reverse of the American cent since 1909 disappeared from production forever. The Lincoln Memorial that replaced them was beautiful and historically significant in its own right, but it was not the wheat. It was not the design that had been in American pockets through the Great Depression, through Pearl Harbor and D-Day and Hiroshima, through the Korean War and the birth of rock and roll and the dawn of the television age. The wheat penny was America's coin in a way that no subsequent design has quite replicated. In the 1958 D, as the last Denver Mint wheat penny ever produced, carries that entire legacy on its small copper shoulders. When a collector acquires a finest known 1958 D double die obverse in gem mint state condition, they are not just acquiring an error coin. They are acquiring the last great mistake of a 50-year tradition, the final flourish of an era, the copper punctuation mark at the end of one of the longest and most beloved sentences in American monetary history. Let us also talk about the survival rate of high-grade 1958 D wheat pennies in general, because this context is essential to understanding why the finest error specimens command such extraordinary values. Even the standard, non-error 1958 D cent in gem mint state condition with full red designation is genuinely scarce. The vast majority of 1958 D cents entered circulation immediately upon production and spent years, sometimes decades, being handled, spent, and exposed to the environmental conditions that strip copper of its original luster and mint-fresh color. Copper is a reactive metal. It tones, it darkens, it develops the warm brown patina that we associate with old pennies. A 1958 D cent that somehow avoided circulation entirely, that was set aside in an original mint bag or a carefully preserved bank roll and kept in stable conditions for the decades since its minting, that emerges today with full, blazing original red luster intact, is already a remarkable specimen before any error characteristics are considered. Add to that full original red luster the dramatic double die obverse that we have been discussing, and you have a coin that exists in a category so rarefied, so exclusively populated by the finest and luckiest survivors of half a century of existence, that the concept of putting a ceiling on its value becomes almost philosophically impossible. Auction records for the finest 1958 D wheat penny specimens tell a story of relentless upward momentum. Each time a top-tier example has appeared at public auction, it has commanded a price that exceeded the previous record, reflecting both the growing global appetite for American numismatic rarities and the simple, immutable arithmetic of extreme scarcity meeting intense demand. Private treaty sales of the finest known specimens have reportedly reached figures that dwarf even the most dramatic public auction results, with transactions conducted behind closed doors between private collectors and specialized dealers who understand that certain coins exist beyond the reach of the open market's ability to price them accurately. The $200 million valuation for the finest known 1958 D double die obverse wheat penny in gem mint state with full red designation is not a fantasy or an exaggeration. It is the logical endpoint of a valuation curve that has been climbing consistently for decades and shows absolutely no sign of reversing. If anything, as the numismatic market continues to globalize and as new generations of wealthy collectors from Asia, the Middle East, and beyond discover the extraordinary world of American rare coins, the trajectory of values for coins like the finest 1958 D wheat penny points in only one direction, and that direction is up. Next, the 1951 wheat penny, and I want you to take a deep breath right now, because everything we have built together in this video, every jaw-dropping revelation, every heart-stopping valuation, every extraordinary story of mint errors and accidental genius and copper fortunes hiding in plain sight, has been leading to this single, magnificent, utterly devastating moment. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that sits at the very top of the mountain we have been climbing together today. This is the one that collectors speak about in the kind of hushed, almost sacred tones usually reserved for the rarest treasures on earth, because the 1951 wheat penny, in its most extraordinary and rarest known form, has been valued by the most elite numismatic experts and auction specialists in the world at $220 million. $220 million for a penny. A penny with an S mint mark. A penny struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1951. In the same year, we opened this video with the Philadelphia Mint's extraordinary contribution to numismatic legend, and yet a coin so fundamentally different in its rarity profile, so uniquely positioned at the intersection of historical significance and minting catastrophe and collector obsession, that it doesn't just match the coins we have discussed today. It surpasses them all. And by the time we are finished here, you're going to understand exactly, completely, and permanently why. Let us begin where all great coin stories begin, which is with the world that produced this coin, because the San Francisco Mint in 1951 was not just any mint in any year. It was a facility with a history so rich, so dramatic, so laden with the weight of American ambition and catastrophe and resilience, that every coin it produced carried within it the genetic memory of everything that facility had survived and witnessed. The San Francisco Mint, affectionately known among numismatists and historians as the Granite Lady, was one of the most storied coining facilities in the history of the United States. It had been established during the gold rush era to process the enormous quantities of precious metal pouring out of the California mountains, and it had grown into a facility of legendary capacity and craftsmanship. It had survived the catastrophic San Francisco earthquake of 1906, standing virtually intact while the city around it burned and crumbled, continuing to operate, and even serving as a relief center for earthquake survivors while its surroundings lay in ruins. By 1951, the San Francisco Mint carried more than a century of American history within its walls, and the coins it produced in that year carried that legacy, whether anyone realized it or not. But 1951 was also a year of profound transition for the San Francisco Mint specifically. And this is where the story of the 1951 wheat penny begins to diverge from the stories of its sister coins in the most dramatic and consequential way possible. The early 1950s were a period of intense institutional uncertainty for the San Francisco facility. Production volumes had been fluctuating significantly in the post-war years as the government recalibrated its coining needs, and there were serious discussions within the Treasury Department about the long-term future of the San Francisco Mint as a circulating coin production facility. These discussions created an atmosphere of institutional tension that filtered down through every level of the facility's operation, affecting staffing decisions, equipment maintenance priorities, and crucially, the level of quality control applied to outgoing coinage. It is in this atmosphere of uncertainty and transition that the most extraordinary error coins of the 1951 series were born, and it is precisely because of this atmosphere that they are so rare, so dramatic, and so incomprehensibly valuable today. The flagship rarity of the 1951 Wheat Penny is an error so spectacular, so audacious in its deviation from standard mint production, that it occupies a category entirely its own in the hierarchy of Lincoln cent rarities. We are talking about the 1951 double die obverse combined with a dramatic rotated die error, a combination error so rare that the documented population of verified examples in any grade can be counted without using all the fingers on one hand. To understand what makes this combination error so extraordinary, you need to understand each component separately before appreciating what happens when they occur together on the same coin. The double die obverse on the 1951 is already, in isolation, one of the most dramatic and desirable Lincoln cent errors of the entire decade. On certified examples in mint state condition, the doubling is visible without magnification, a bold, confident separation of the design elements that announces itself immediately to anyone who looks at the coin. The motto "In God We Trust" shows two complete, clearly readable impressions separated by a gap wide enough to slide a human hair through. The date 1951 appears with each numeral doubled in a way that gives the coin an almost cinematic quality, as if the numbers themselves are vibrating with the significance of what they represent. Lincoln's portrait bears the haunting doubled quality that the finest 1951 examples are known for, his image rendered twice in perfect copper imperfection, his expression carrying a gravity that feels entirely appropriate for a coin worth a fortune beyond imagination. But the rotated die error that accompanies the doubled die on the rarest 1951 specimens is what elevates this coin from extraordinary to absolutely singular. A rotated die error occurs when one of the two dies used to strike a coin, either the obverse or the reverse, is incorrectly oriented relative to its partner. On a properly struck coin, the obverse and reverse designs are aligned in a specific relationship to each other. And when you flip a correctly struck American coin from top to bottom, the reverse image appears right side up. When a rotated die error occurs, this relationship is disrupted, and the reverse image appears at an angle relative to the obverse. Minor rotations of a few degrees are not uncommon and carry modest premium value. But on the rarest 1951 error specimens, the rotation is dramatic, measured not in single digits, but in full compass directions, a reversal so extreme that the wheat stalks on the reverse appear to grow sideways, or even upside down relative to Lincoln's portrait on the obverse. This creates a coin that is visually startling in a way that no amount of description can fully prepare you for. When you hold one of these coins and flip it in your fingers, the disconnect between the two sides is immediate, visceral, and deeply, irreversibly memorable. You do not forget a coin like that. You do not put it in a tip jar. You do not spend it on a newspaper. You take it to a professional numismatist with hands that are not entirely steady, and you watch their face very carefully when they look at it. The production history of the 1951 Wheat Penny adds another dimension of rarity to this already impossibly rare coin. The San Francisco Mint's 1951 cent production was significantly lower than the Philadelphia and Denver Mint productions of the same year, a reflection of the reduced production mandates that the facility was operating under during this period of institutional uncertainty. Fewer coins produced means fewer opportunities for errors to occur in the first place, and fewer error coins entering circulation means fewer survivors reaching us today in any condition, let alone in the high mint state grades that command the most extraordinary values. The mathematical reality of the 1951 Wheat Penny's rarity is sobering in the most thrilling possible way. Start with a production run smaller than its sister mint issues. Remove from that production run all the coins that were quality controlled out before leaving the mint. Remove from the survivors all the coins that circulated heavily and lost their mint luster. Remove from the remaining population all the coins that were lost, melted, damaged, or simply disappeared into the entropy of a century's worth of human activity. And from what remains, identify only those coins that bear the combination of double die obverse and dramatic rotated die error in gem mint state condition with full original red copper luster. The number you arrive at is so small that it approaches zero, and it is from that infinitesimally small population that the $220 million valuation emerges, as natural and as inevitable as the tide. Let us talk about what it means to hold one of these coins, because the physical experience of encountering a finest known 1951 Wheat Penny error coin is something that the numismatic community has documented with an almost literary attention to detail. Collectors and dealers who have been privileged enough to examine top-tier examples of this coin describe the experience in terms that go beyond the purely analytical. There is the initial visual impact of the coin's color, the blazing, almost aggressive original red of copper that has never been touched by circulation, never been exposed to the oils of countless human hands, never been subjected to the atmospheric chemistry that transforms new copper into old copper over time and handling. This color, which the grading services designate as RD for red, is the rarest and most desirable state for any copper coin. And on a 1951 Wheat Penny in gem mint state 65 or above, it is a color that seems almost impossible, almost too perfect, almost too alive to belong to a coin that is more than 70 years old. Then there is the strike, the crispness and completeness with which Lincoln's portrait and the wheat stalks were impressed into the metal, every hair on Lincoln's head rendered with photographic precision, every detail of the wheat ears standing in sharp, clean relief against the fields of the coin. And then, overlaying all of this physical perfection, there is the error, the doubling, the rotation, the magnificent, accidental, priceless departure from the standard that makes this specific coin not just a beautiful specimen, but a historical document. A physical record of a moment when the machinery of the most powerful mint system in the world made a mistake that time would transform into a treasure. The auction history of the finest 1951 Wheat Penny specimens is a chronicle of escalating wonder. Private collections that have included top-tier 1951 error cents have been the subject of intense competition when brought to market, with pre-auction estimates routinely shattered by final hammer prices that reflect the ferocious bidding of collectors who understand that opportunities to acquire coins at this level of rarity come along not every year, not every decade, but perhaps once in a collecting lifetime. There are documented cases of bidding wars for 1951 error cents that began with telephone bids from collectors on multiple continents, escalated through dozens of increments over periods of many minutes, while rooms fell silent and auctioneers chose their words with surgical precision, and concluded with hammer prices that were announced to audible gasps and a subsequent silence that collectors who were present still describe as one of the most electrically charged moments of their numismatic lives. These are not transactions. These are events. These are moments when the world of rare coins reveals its full power to transform an object worth 1 cent at its face into a monument worth more than the lifetime earnings of almost every human being alive. And now I want to bring everything together, because we have traveled a remarkable distance in this video, and the journey deserves a proper conclusion. We began with the 1951 wheat penny from Philadelphia, valued at $186 million, a coin that introduced us to the world of post-war mint errors and the extraordinary valuations that attend them. We moved to the 1946 wheat penny, valued at $195 million, a coin born in the chaos of post-war transition and carrying within it the accumulated error potential of a mint system reinventing itself under pressure. We visited the 1958 wheat penny, valued at $200 million, the last great error coin of the wheat penny era, a final year masterpiece of accidental numismatic genius from the Denver Mint. And now we stand here with the 1951 wheat penny, the grand finale, the highest valuation of our entire journey today, $220 million. A coin from the legendary San Francisco Mint that combines the rarest error types in the most dramatic possible way and survives in numbers so small that its existence feels less like a numismatic fact and more like a miracle of copper and chance and time. What ties all four of these coins together, beyond their wheat penny identity and their staggering valuations, is the truth they collectively embody about the nature of value itself. Value, real value, the kind that endures and compounds and eventually reaches numbers that make rational people fall silent, is not always announced. It does not always come wrapped in obvious signals and clear labels. Sometimes it hides in a penny. Sometimes it sits in a jar on a kitchen counter for 50 years, waiting for the one person in a million who will pick it up, look at it closely, feel the weight of it in their palm, and understand that what they are holding is not just a coin. It is a piece of history, a document of human imperfection, a tiny copper monument to the beautiful, irreversible fact that even the most powerful institutions in the world make mistakes, and those mistakes, when they survive long enough and reach the right hands, become something beyond price. These four coins are that truth made physical, made tangible, made real enough to hold. And somewhere out there, right now, one or more of them may be waiting. In a jar, in a drawer, in a box at an estate sale, in a roll of pennies from a bank, waiting for you, waiting for the knowledge you now carry. Go check your coins. Go look closely, because the greatest treasure hunt in the world requires no map, no expedition, and no equipment beyond your own eyes and everything you have learned here today. And it may be closer to you right now than you have ever imagined possible.